let's talk about wizards because this is
Onto the wizards,
onto
yeah.
the wizards. Okay, first of all, obviously, if I said we said the word wizard, and listeners of the show, Lord Be With You podcast show, will be thinking they might think of, like Gandalf or Saruman, or they might really be more of like, into the Harry Potter sort of story.
You're
They
a
might,
wizard, Harry.
yeah, you know what I mean? And so, and even outside of sort of fiction, there's ideas of what a wizard is. So what is a wizard within the Lord of the Rings paradigm, as opposed to, say, maybe another famous film we could possibly think of that would do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really good question because Tolkien's wizards are pretty distinctive. He uses the word wizard, which is obviously that's one of our words. Like, there's not a word that Tolkien made up for Lord
Yeah.
of the Rings, which is unusual. Most of the words he is making up. Um, I think he uses it because there's sort of connotations of wisdom that go along with that. The idea of having sort of otherworldly powers as well.
Yes.
Um, but the wizards are a bit different in Middle Earth in that they don't really do spells or
Yeah.
sorcery in the way that we're accustomed to wizards doing. I think in a lot of
Mm.
other films and literature. I don't know if you can think of any point where Gandalf does a spell in Lord of the Rings.
Gosh, I'm trying to think actually now. I can't. Hang on a minute. That's a good question. I can't really think.
Yeah, exactly right. He's got a magic staff that can go shiny at points, especially in the
Yeah.
films. There's
Yeah.
ways to get in. They're trying to get into the mines of Moria, and he's
Yeah.
he's doing some incantations on the door. But that's
Yeah.
pretty much it in terms of Gandalf doing wizardry, as
Yeah.
opposed to Saruman, who in Lord of the Rings is the sort of the wizard who goes bad. He's sort of the
Yeah.
main antagonist in the middle part of the story.
Of course.
That's sort of where he goes wrong. Is he's doing a bit too much sorcery. Um, so yeah, that's one interesting difference. The wizards as a whole in Lord of the Rings are referred to as the Istari, which is
Yeah.
a Quenya word, which is the High Elvish language. And apparently that translated just means those who know. So they're sort of
Huh.
these wise figures. That
Yeah. So
yeah.
they're not Valar, are they? They are.
Oh no, we can get to that if you want, but
Yeah.
we'll
Okay.
save
Yeah.
that for later on.
Should we come back to that one then?
Yeah, of course, of course.
We'll come back to that one at the end then. Okay. What exactly? Okay. All right. Fair enough then. Okay. So, um, okay. So let's go to where are they? Yeah, we can go to kind of where they're
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
from. Where they're coming from. These wizards, like, there's obviously, apart from sort of the thoughts of Tolkien himself, what is their sort of genesis, and what is their purpose? Let's start with the purpose first.
Yeah, so in terms of the thoughts of Tolkien, they clearly have inspiration, particularly from Merlin, the sort of wizard in
Oh yeah,
Arthurian legend. I think we can recognize a real sort of clear similarity with Gandalf in particular and Merlin.
yeah,
Um,
benevolent sort of,
Sort of
wise,
guiding figure, yeah, a
yeah,
source of wisdom.
mentor,
The wizards in Lord of the Rings, or within the legendarium, whatever we're going to call the overarching story, in the
yeah,
grand scheme of things, are not around in Middle Earth for that long. They arrive sort of halfway through the Third Age, and the
okay,
Third Age starts with the defeat of Sauron at the hands of the Last Alliance. So when Isildur cuts the ring from Sauron's hand,
yeah,
and it ends with again, spoiler alert, Frodo and Sam and Gollum destroying the ring at the end of the Lord of the Rings. So, and they're only around for the sort of second half of that. In terms of our years, that's still a fairly long time. I think it's something like 1,500 years or something like that.
oh yeah,
But in terms of the whole sort of three ages of Middle Earth, they're not around for any of the story of the Silmarillion, really, in an active role anyway. They arrive in Middle Earth from over the sea. So in terms of where they come from, it's a fairly big clue. They come from somewhere away in the west, and they arrive on these boats. And Tolkien writes that slightly differently different fragments that we have. Saruman in one version arrives first, and Gandalf arrives after. And yeah, they arrive on the west coast of Middle-earth around the time that Sauron's shadow is starting to reappear in Middle-earth, which we get sort of is referred to a little bit in the prologue of the films. They talk about the darkness growing again. And they're really sent to encourage elves and men and other free folk to resist Sauron and to defeat him. And they do that with varying success.
Yeah, I mean, like, they come over and because there wasn't a lot of them that come over. It's not like 10,000 of them came over, is it? I mean, how many? It's a small band of wizards that come over, isn't it?
So we don't know exactly how many there are, but there are 5 that are referred to in Tolkien's writing. So there's Saruman, who also has an elvish name that I've forgotten. I have to look up. Karumo, that's it.
Okay.
There is Gandalf, who is called Mithrandir by the elves. And
I like that.
Called,
that sounds good.
Mithrandir means the wandering pilgrim, I think.
Yeah, that's well suited.
yeah. And his Quenya name is Alorin, and he's actually referred to in the Silmarillion very briefly, but as Alorin. So unless you know that's his name, it might pass you by.
I didn't know. So I knew about Mithrandir, but I didn't. So say that.
I know about Alorin. So
Alorin.
Lorin. Yeah.
Oh wow! Get your notebook out if you listen. When you listen to this,
don't write it down.
Get your notebook out. We only get the best on the Lord Be With You podcast show. Brilliant. That's some great knowledge. That is.
There's another one called Iwendil, and he is known in Middle-earth as Radagast. He appears very briefly in Lord of the Rings. He doesn't appear at all in The Hobbit, but in the films he's given a very extended and expanded role.
God,
don't start.
Don't start. Don't start me off about.
Not time to discuss Radagast.
No, that he was shocking in the film. He was. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Any of you guys at home that loved it, I'm sorry. He was. That was appalling.
It's not how I imagined it. Let's say that. Radagast in my mind is a sort of. He's the Middle-earth's sort of St. Francis of Assisi, and
yeah.
The Hobbit.
That's a great.
Radagast was not like that. And then there's everyone's favorite wizards, which are the 2 blue wizards, also known as the what's the word? Luin is the Elvish for blue, because you get the Blue Mountains as well. I can't remember what their title is, but they're the blue wizards, and they go into the east of Middle-earth, and they do not appear in any of the stories ever again, which you would assume means they're not very important, but everyone on the internet loves to assume that this means that they're really, really important. So the two blue wizards, we don't know what they do. In one of Tolkien's fragments, they're given names, but we're not sure sort of what stage he was of writing, whether that was something he wanted to stick with. Those stories tended to morph and change, but in that fragment they're called Alatar and Palando.
Wouldn't it be amazing if there was a lost book of Tolkien's, or lost manuscript, and there was even if it was a short story
about the
saying
wizards.
The adventures of the Blue Wizards. Oh my gosh!
What would I not pay to have a copy of that?
That would be amazing. Come on, I mean, it is. You've said this before, Luke, as well, about that Tolkien, how the way he writes. It's almost. I have referred to this in an episode on the podcast show. It's on YouTube as Christian Fandom Geek as well. There's an episode called Luke versus Jesus, and I kind of refer to the idea of that stories, sometimes that writers, authors feel that stories are not originating from them, but it's it's coming from another realm, and they're just kind of the channel or the vessel in which the story is being brought forth. And you get that sort of idea you get that sort of concept and and flavor with Tolkien, don't you? Like that, if he doesn't write about these blue wizards, it's because the universe hasn't given much to say about them, sort of thing.
Yeah, because he genuinely doesn't know. And there's a lovely letter that Tolkien wrote to one of his friends where he described a meeting with someone that helped inspire the character of Gandalf. And this
Yeah.
person was talking to him about his work. And this guy said to Tolkien, I don't suppose you think that you wrote those stories yourself, did you? And Tolkien said that line to him was like pure Gandalf. And from that moment, he was like, no, I don't suppose I did. Like there's something in those stories that comes from somewhere else. But yeah, I love that.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. If you're at home listening to work or in the park having a jog or whatever, and you have any interesting theories about what happened with the two blue wizards, leave us a comment on the YouTube channel Christian Fandom Geek, and let us know what you think happened to them, or even if you can come up with your own little short story, and then we'll even read it out in the show as well. So that'll be an interesting one.
So yeah, we can go into a bit more detail about sort of where the wizards come, like why coming from the west is important and that sort of thing.
Please do, yes, because I want to know. Yeah, we want to know that.
So yeah, we get the stories of the wizards entirely from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, really. And the most we get in terms of background on them is in a chapter of Unfinished Tales, which is a selection of Tolkien's writing that his son Christopher published posthumously.
Yeah.
And it's only about 20 pages, and that's all we get. But he weaves together a few different extracts that Tolkien had written, both in terms of things that got cut from Lord of the Rings and just notes that Tolkien had written to help him figure out the stories as he was writing them. And from that, we know that the wizards appear as old men in Middle-earth. That's what their bodies look like. Some of the people of Middle-earth assume that they are elves, presumably because they spend some of their time with the elves. But that also creates a possibility that elves can have beards, which is that's another interesting discussion.
Isn't that a paradox? Well. That's got to be a paradox, right?
No, because we get one elf in Lord of the Rings is described as having a beard as well. But elves and beards might have to be an entire other episode anyway. Yeah. But they originally come from the Blessed Realm, from over the seas, from the world that we've been talking about before, which is inhabited by the Valar and the Eldar.
So that's the Undying Lands.
The Undying Lands, yeah. These angelic beings.
Yeah.
And they're Maya, so they're lesser spiritual beings than the Valar.
Okay, so we spoke about that before, didn't we? Like, so you've got the Valar, which are the sort of, if we're thinking of sort of using a biblical framework or paradigm, I would think of the Valar as sort of archangels, like you think of a sort of Michael or something like that, that's the sort of top ranking angel sort of thing, and then maybe a sub rank underneath that would be the Maya. Is that about right?
Yeah, I reckon that's probably about fair enough. And Sauron is a Maya as well. He's a fallen Maya, so that's going to be important because these Maya are sent specifically to resist and match that Maya.
So they are the same type of spirits, aren't they?
Definitely, very much so. And they also represent, I think, as well, the Valar sort of changing and adapting and realizing the error of their ways. The Silmarillion, we see a lot of instances of the Valar either not doing things or doing too much, if that makes sense. The wizards are a really interesting example of them. The Valar almost retreating, I guess, deciding not to interfere directly with the affairs of Middle-earth, and yet at the same time they don't leave them to their fate. They are invested in that world and in the triumph of good over evil. And that's why the wizards are sent.
Because I'm thinking sort of when you say that, like they're working in a very organic way because they're part. Like you think of Gandalf, I know he's like sort of he's a nomad, isn't he? But he's
Yeah.
very invested in the cultures that he goes to, isn't he?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it's that idea of kind of a sort of grace or sort of providence being worked out through the people, through the culture, through something, a being that's there, that's lived amongst them. And it's a very Christian idea of, you think of, you know, as Christians, the salvation that we see in Christ is God's salvation through somebody that's lived and walks amongst
Yeah.
Israel,
It's
the Middle
messianic.
East. Yeah, that sort of idea of, we didn't know that this guy was that special, but because he sat down and had fish with us and broke bread with us, but actually he's got it. We find out how amazing he is, and it's that idea of sort of a sort of grace being worked out, but in a very almost seemingly ordinary way type thing. I like that idea.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Tolkien would have been especially fearful of portraying the incarnation in his work. So
yeah,
it's sometimes foreshadowed, but there's no point in
direct.
his story, yeah, where Eru the One is incarnate in a bodily form. But
Yeah,
there's ways in which definitely the wizards are applicable to that idea, like you were saying. They have these physical bodies, and so although they're these angelic spiritual beings, they, as we'll see, they become subject to everything that human bodies are weak to. So they'll feel hunger and pain, and they'll even feel sort of envy, greed, joy, that sort of thing. And their bodies can be killed, although their beings are immortal.
brilliant. Now, going from that, this will be a nice little link there. So, in terms of a certain wizard that comes back to life after an encounter with the Balrog, when I first saw that um, at the cinema, and I saw how they portrayed Gandalf, although at the time they tried to keep it in a way that, is it Gandalf? Is it not Gandalf? Because it sounds like Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee.
They put Christopher Lee's voice in, don't they? Which I find really funny because at that point, neither Aragorn, Legolas, or Gimli have ever heard Saruman speak, so it doesn't mean anything.
Oh my god!
It's just
So
for us.
is this for us? Oh, brilliant! There you
Yeah,
go. I mean, and obviously, like, anything involving Christopher Lee is automatically amazing. To be
great
honest,
voice.
he's he was underrated. He really was.
Unbelievable. That's a quick side note, is that the Children of Hurin, the book, the audiobook
Yeah.
of that is narrated by Sir Christopher Lee. It's
No
wonderful.
way.
Yeah.
Ah, right.
Got to get a copy of that.
I'm
Write
gonna
it
have to
down in your
download that.
notebook. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, go and download that because Christopher Lee's absolutely. I mean, like, everything I've seen him in, even in, like, I know the prequels had in Star Wars kind of weren't great. Let's be honest. I mean, Revenge of the Sith was the best of them, but they weren't that great. But even his character of Count Dooku, even that role within the franchise was brilliant.
He's suave, yeah.
He's brought such style and sophistication to whatever role he went into, and I've really,
Absolutely.
yeah, he's a brilliant guy, and obviously a Brit as well. So there you go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so obviously, this white figure who, regal, powerful, almost cosmic being is there. They don't know who it is. There's a voice of, is it Gandalf? Is it Saruman? We're not sure what's going on. Um, and we find out that it's Mithrandir. Okay, but he's different.
Yeah.
What's gone on there? What's happened?
Well, in the just to add to that, one of my favorite visually, one of my favorite scenes in all of those Lord of the Rings films, and possibly in any film, is that one at the start of Two Towers where they show Gandalf and the Balrog falling. It's almost slow-mo into
Oh, it's
the
amazing. It's
cave at the bottom
amazing.
of Khazad Dûm, and
Oh, it's
as they
amazing.
fall, it just lights up the whole of this cavern. And oh yeah, incredible. I love that every time.
It was. Do you know what that reminded me of? And we have to talk about this. Do you know, like when you see a really good James Bond film, and it has that sort of cold open where you just go straight into the action, and it's just like, right, okay, I'm into this now. You know, literally the opening credits are an action sequence. It was like it's basically that. It's a James Bond cold open, straight into it. Gandalf's fighting this Balrog, going into this like into Khazad Dûm right into it, and you see him as he's falling, pick up the sword. So the sword's got ahead of him, and he's basically swan dives to the sword, doesn't he? And it's an absolutely amazing like visual treat. What a start to a film. Absolutely amazing.
Can't believe you just compared Lord of the Rings to James Bond, man. Unbelievable.
Well, actually, there is a link there because apparently Christopher Lee is related to one of the guy that wrote, I think,
Well, he's
James
in
Bond.
a James Bond film as well, isn't he?
Is in a James Bond film as well
Yeah.
because is it the man with the golden gun? Is that if
There you
I'm
go.
remembering correctly?
Saruman himself.
Is in it, and apparently, and this might be, I think this might be true that James Bond is written because influenced by Christopher Lee personally. So the guy that's wrote James Bond has kind of
Ian
modeled
Fleming,
some.
yeah.
Yeah, he's modeled it on Christopher Lee. So
Oh. Anyway, we
yeah,
digress.
yeah, we did, but like, well, we give you we have that sometimes in the show because our
That's
audience, our
fine,
listeners,
yeah.
they love that. They love little bits of side knowledge and things that they weren't expecting and things like that. Um, okay, so it is a phenomenal scene. So okay,
What were we talking about? We're
so
talking
we're
about
talking
Gandalf coming back.
we're talking about Gandalf coming
Yeah.
back. So we've seen that. We've seen how he's gone out. Like, there is another thing as well. I remember this from years ago. The part where he's fighting, obviously, because you see him going down in the Kazakh Doom, don't you? You see him going down, but he comes
Yeah.
out the other end. Now, I was confused about that. Like, where is it? Is he come out the other side of the mountain? How does that work?
Oh, this is beautiful. This one of my favorite parts of the books is Gandalf describing his battle with the Balrog to
Yeah,
Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. And so they fall from all the way from the bridge of Khazad Dûm down
mm,
to the very bottom of the mines in like the roots of the world.
yeah,
Kind of like Jonah, I guess.
mm,
And they fall into this pool of water, I guess, at the bottom. And I
yeah,
think Tolkien describes the Balrog as becoming like a creature of slime, like his fire is extinguished. And
mm,
they find this, what's called the Endless Stair, which even in Lord of the Rings, they'd thought was legendary. Like Gimli didn't believe that it existed, but
yeah,
they found it. And this stair goes all the way from the roots of the mines all the way up to the top of Celebdil, which is one of the three mountains that Moria is mined under.
yeah.
And so they fight all the way from the bottom to the top, and it's at the very top that Gandalf strikes the Balrog down, but is mortally wounded in the process, and his spirit leaves his body. So
What
yeah,
amazing.
that's well worth a read, that part, because it is a battle of epic and symbolic proportions. Because any time, especially in Tolkien's world, that someone goes underground, it's
Yeah,
you can be sure that there is a sort of resurrection symbol following.
yeah,
Aragorn
yeah,
going into the paths of the dead is the other really good one.
yeah, yeah. I love that as well. Yeah, with Aragon, that'll be another episode. We talk about that another episode because
Yeah.
the idea with that, I won't go into it too much, but the idea that I got from that one with Aragon, when the and I forgot the actual character's name, but when the leader goes to strike Aragon and Aragon's sword blocks him, um, and obviously Peter Jackson shows that in a very vivid way, like, oh my gosh, how's that just like what just happened then? Uh, and it's like, and straight away I thought of the idea covenant. That was the first thing I thought was covenant, and that's obviously coming from biblical Christianity of, you know, that
Because they've got that
our
oath with his
yes,
ancestor. Yeah.
yeah, and look, and I took it in a very biblical way, but I took it the power of a covenant agreement, like the power of that covenant had power over the physical realm in that situation, that even the physics of that place. And obviously, I know Tolkien wouldn't be necessarily thinking in that way, but that's how I interpreted that, like that the covenant had power over the physics of that situation. I thought, whoa, that is a really spiritual and powerful sort of idea. Um, but yeah, we won't go into that too much right
Yeah,
now. Brilliant. So, okay, the Christian imagery, Gandalf's gone down.
yeah.
Lightning hits the sword. He smites
Oh
the
no, that's
Balrog.
a really good point, because the lightning in the film, if you've read the Silmarillion, that's really lovely, because you know
Yeah.
who has power over those elements in the wider universe. So it's really
Yes.
nice, the idea of Gandalf working in community with some of the Valar, maybe in his
Yeah.
battle against evil.
Yeah. A
Um,
sort of providence again, sort of
yeah, yeah.
playing out.
So your Gandalf, I don't know if we've mentioned before the battle, is Gandalf the Grey, my
Yes.
favorite kind of Gandalf. The Istari all get given different colors. So Saruman is the white,
Yeah.
Gandalf is the grey,
Yeah.
Radagast is the brown, and then we've got
Mhm.
the two blue wizards.
Mm.
So Gandalf comes, when he returns, he becomes the white himself.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the colors really relate to.
Yeah.
Tolkien doesn't really give us any clues as to that. I personally don't think that being the white means that you're the leader. I think people
Okay.
can read that because Saruman is initially the head of the order, although
Yeah.
not everyone thought that he should have been.
Mm.
We can go into that in a bit, but
Yeah.
when I think of it as a bit like, I guess, sort of almost a job description. When Gandalf comes back, he acts quite differently as Gandalf the White than
He's
he
been
did as
promoted,
Gandalf
hasn't
the
he?
Grey. Yeah, and
He's been
he
promoted.
even says, I think, doesn't he, that he represents sort of Saruman as he should have been.
Yes. Yeah.
And they make him look quite different in the films, like he's got a different beard and hair and that sort of get up. I think the book describes him as wearing different clothes, but
Yeah.
I personally don't imagine him as looking too different. I think he's sort of just got a different job.
Yeah. When I seen that, and I was amazed by it, and I got a lot of Christ imagery from that, like a sort of, he's been resurrected, and he's come back as Gandalf the White. He seems more powerful as well, and kind of, I did kind of, it did make me think of Jesus, a resurrected Jesus, and I suppose obviously from a Christian point of view, that's an obvious thing, but yeah, I did enjoy seeing it on screen as well, and I liked how Peter Jackson showed that visually. I was impressed with that.
Hmm. Gandalf's character for me reminds me most of the Holy Spirit, I think.
Yeah.
They're all sent to Middle Earth to resist Sauron, but I think the Maya command them to do it not through force. So they're
Mm.
not allowed to use force or fear in the way that Sauron would.
Mm.
They have to persuade and encourage the people of Middle Earth to
Mm.
do good. And ultimately, we see some of the other wizards going off in different directions on that. I mean,
Yeah.
Saruman tends to rely too much on craft
Mm.
and I guess law and knowledge, and that's where he
Mm.
goes wrong. He ends up
Mm.
isolating himself. Radagast is really fascinated with the natural world, and
Yes.
sometimes Tolkien seems to insinuate that's a good thing. Sometimes he writes that as Radagast has got a bit distracted by the things that grow and the animals, and he's been
Mm.
distracted from the reason why he was put there. The
Mm.
blue wizards, obviously, we don't see, and so we're left with Gandalf, who really is the exemplar of what the wizards were sent there to do.
Yeah.
He's gentle and joyful, but just encouraging. And almost every time that Gandalf shows up, the people that are near to him are encouraged and their spirits are emboldened. And yeah, I think that's what I imagine the Holy Spirit being like.
Brilliant. Okay, this has been an amazing episode, and I think just to kind of finish off, just a quick one. What did you make of Saruman's arc in Lord of the Rings? Obviously, we've talked about him a little bit. What did you think of his from where he started to where he finished off?
In the book or the film, because they're quite different arcs.
Okay, so give us a quick brief,
So in the
two.
films, the extended version, Saruman does get a death scene. His arc closed in Isengard. In the book, Saruman doesn't die at the start of Return of the King, and he ends up going back to the Shire and corrupting it and sort of industrializing it really, and creating this really miserable, very controlling little form of government there. And he basically does it out of bitterness and revenge because he's annoyed that the hobbits have foiled him. And there's something really, really powerful about this particular image in Return of the King, the book, where Saruman is just a bitter old man walking through the countryside, just looking to get revenge out of spite. And you think of like how far he'd fallen from being the head of the order of these super powerful wizards who are supposed to resist Sauron by encouraging and ennobling the people of Middle-earth. And there's something very, very sad, but I think very sort of true and relatable there as well.
Brilliant. So we've come to the end of this episode of the Law Be With You podcast show Wizards Special. Thank you, Luke Sewell, for being on again, and we'll get you back on really soon.
Oh, yeah. To talk about any one of those other topics.
I know. Every time. All right, go and relax, and you've earned it, and we'll talk to you again very soon.